The road out of Jericho was crowded that day, a mixture of pilgrims, travelers, and voices echoing off the stone walls of the old city. The air was dry, filled with the sound of shuffling sandals and murmured conversation. At the edge of the road, among the dust and the noise, sat a man who could see none of it. His name was Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, and he was blind. Every day he sat there begging, listening to footsteps and waiting for the sound of generosity in a stranger's hand. But on this day, something was different. He heard a name whispered, passed from mouth to mouth like fire spreading through dry grass: Jesus of Nazareth. Bartimaeus had heard of him before. The stories had reached even the blind of the teacher who healed the sick, made the lame walk, and gave sight to others like him. His heart began to race. Some said Jesus was just a prophet. Others said he was a miracle worker. But Bartimaeus believed he was more, the son of David, the promised one of God. And now, that very man was walking past him. He couldn't see the crowd, but he could feel it. The noise grew louder, the footsteps multiplied, and his spirit knew this was his moment. He lifted his voice above the crowd and shouted, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." The people around him turned. Some frowned, others whispered, but many rebuked him sharply. "Be quiet," they said. "Don't bother the teacher." But Bartimaeus refused to be silenced. He had lived too long in darkness to let this chance pass. He shouted louder, desperate, raw, and unashamed, "Son of David, have mercy on me." And then the noise stopped. The steps halted, the voices stilled. Jesus stopped walking. That small moment, the Savior standing still, changed everything. The same crowd that had told Bartimaeus to be quiet now spoke new words. "Cheer up, on your feet, he's calling you." Bartimaeus threw off his cloak, the one thing he owned that kept him warm, the symbol of his old life, and stumbled forward. Someone took his arm. Maybe two people guided him. The crowd parted, and he was led into the presence of the one who could see what no one else could. When he stood before Jesus, everything around him faded into silence. Jesus asked, "What do you want me to do for you?" It's a question that seems obvious. Everyone knew Bartimaeus was blind. Everyone knew what he needed. But Jesus wasn't asking for information. He was inviting confession. He wanted Bartimaeus to speak his desire aloud, to claim his faith, to express it in words. The man didn't hesitate. "Rabbi," he said, "I want to see." And Jesus, filled with compassion, said, "Go, your faith has healed you." Immediately his eyes were opened. For the first time, light flooded in. Colors, faces, the outline of trees, the shape of the sky. The world that had existed only through sound and touch now came alive in vision. The first face he ever saw was the face of Jesus. Mark writes, "Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus along the road." That last line is the most powerful part of the story. Bartimaeus didn't run home or get lost in the crowd, he followed. The one who once sat by the roadside now walked beside the Savior. This story, short and simple as it seems, holds some of the deepest truths about faith, persistence, and the mercy of God. First, notice where the miracle begins. Not with sight, but with hearing. Bartimaeus couldn't see Jesus, but he had heard about him. Faith often begins with hearing. Romans 10:17 says, "Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of Christ." Sometimes all we have is a whisper, a rumor of hope, a testimony from someone else's life. But even that is enough to ignite faith if our hearts are open. Bartimaeus didn't have eyes to see Jesus' miracles, but he had ears to hear of his goodness and a voice to cry out for mercy. And that's the next key. He didn't wait for permission to cry out. He didn't wait for the perfect moment or polite silence. He shouted because he believed that mercy was near. When the crowd tried to silence him, he shouted louder. And that's something every believer must learn. When life tries to quiet your faith, cry out even more. The world will always try to hush the voices of those seeking Jesus. Doubt, pride, fear, they all whisper, "Don't bother him. Don't hope too much. Don't believe so strongly." But Jesus always hears the cries that rise above the noise. Then notice the phrase, "Jesus stopped." That might be one of the most beautiful sentences in the Gospels. The Son of God, surrounded by hundreds walking toward his destiny in Jerusalem, stopped for one blind man sitting in the dust. That's the mercy of God, that he hears the individual cry in the middle of the crowd. You might feel unseen, unheard, unnoticed, but this story reminds us that one honest cry for mercy can stop heaven in its tracks. When Jesus called Bartimaeus, the man threw off his cloak. That detail matters. The cloak was probably his only possession, a large outer garment that doubled as a blanket at night. Beggars often spread it on the ground to collect coins. It represented security, survival, identity. Throwing it aside was an act of faith. He was saying, I won't need this anymore. When we come to Jesus, we too must be willing to leave behind the things we once depended on, the habits, fears, or identities that kept us bound. Faith means letting go of what was safe in order to reach for what is promised. And when Jesus asked, "What do you want me to do for you?" he was not only healing Bartimaeus' body, he was revealing his heart. Jesus always invites us to speak our needs to him. He could have healed without a word, but he wanted relationship, not performance. The miracle wasn't a transaction, it was a conversation. That's what prayer really is, not convincing God to act, but inviting him to move in the open spaces of our faith. And when Bartimaeus said, "I want to see," Jesus honored his faith immediately. But notice, Jesus didn't say, "I have healed you." He said, "Your faith has healed you." Faith is not magic, it's trust, it's surrender. It's the belief that Jesus can do what no one else can. And that trust, once placed in him, becomes the channel through which his power flows. Bartimaeus could have stayed silent and missed everything. He could have let the crowd's voices drown his own. But faith spoke louder. There's another beautiful twist. Bartimaeus received physical sight, but he already had spiritual sight before the miracle. He called Jesus Son of David, a messianic title that few others understood. He saw who Jesus really was before his eyes ever opened. Sometimes those who seem most broken have the clearest spiritual vision. After the healing, Mark writes, he followed Jesus on the road. That phrase closes the story, but opens a new chapter in Bartimaeus' life. He didn't just receive a miracle, he became a disciple. It's one thing to be blessed by Jesus, it's another to follow him afterward. So many people come to God for help, but walk away once they receive it. Bartimaeus didn't. The same voice that cried out for mercy now joined the crowd that walked beside the Savior toward Jerusalem, toward the cross. The man who once sat by the road was now walking the road of faith. Every part of this story is a reflection of our own spiritual journey. We are all Bartimaeus, blind in some way, sitting in the dust of our limitations, waiting for light. And Jesus is still passing by. Sometimes he comes in the middle of chaos, when life feels crowded and noisy. But he always hears the cry that comes from the heart. The question is, will we call out? Will we push past the voices that say, "Be quiet"? Will we throw off the cloak and step forward when he calls? Because when we do, we'll discover that he still stops for the ones who believe. There's another layer to this story, Jericho. It's not just any city. Jericho was the place where God once brought down walls, where victory came through faith. Now at Jericho again, God was breaking down another kind of wall, the one between darkness and sight, despair and hope. Bartimaeus' miracle is both physical and symbolic, the tearing down of blindness, both in the eyes and in the soul. We all need that moment when Jesus opens our eyes, not just to see the world, but to see truth, grace, and love as they really are. When you think about it, the greatest miracle in this story isn't just that Bartimaeus saw, it's that he followed. He didn't just receive a gift, he responded with gratitude and devotion. That's what real faith produces, transformation. And if you look closely, this miracle happened just before Jesus entered Jerusalem for the last time. The healing of Bartimaeus was one of the final miracles before the cross. It's as if Mark is saying, before we see Jesus suffer, we must first learn what it means to see with faith. Bartimaeus represents every person who dares to cry out for mercy, every believer who won't let the crowd silence them, every heart that says, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." And when we cry out like that, he still stops, he still calls, he still heals. Maybe your blindness isn't physical. Maybe it's confusion, despair, fear, or guilt. Maybe you're sitting in your own Jericho, watching life pass by. But the truth of this story is the same. Jesus is near. And when he asks, "What do you want me to do for you?" he's inviting you to believe again. Do you want to see, really see, the world as he does? To walk by faith, not by fear? To be free from the past and step into the light? Then answer as Bartimaeus did, "Lord, I want to see." And when you do, you'll find that his mercy still opens eyes, His love still restores hope, and his presence still turns beggars into believers. Faith begins with a cry, but it ends with following. Bartimaeus' story reminds us that no one is too far gone, too broken, or too hidden for God's grace. Jesus still stops for those who call his name. So keep calling, keep believing. Even when others tell you to be quiet, shout louder, because your cry might just be the sound that makes heaven stand still. Thank you for watching today's message. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and follow Holy Path Insights. Let the faith of Bartimaeus remind you that Jesus still passes by the roads of your life, ready to open your eyes, renew your heart, and lead you into the light of his love.